If you want to catch more fish this fall, you need to get out, throw one of these. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another exciting episode of Milliken Fishing. I took a break from fishing every day out on the lake to drop some knowledge on you. And as you can tell by the title, we're talking fall baits today. It's September, it's football season. We are into the fall season. I know it's sad. Summer's over. That's like my favorite time of the year to fish, but you can catch a lot of great fish in the fall. I know you guys just saw all the baits I love to throw in the fall, so you can just stop watching right now if you want to cheat. But what I'm going to do in this video today is tell you exactly where and how to work all those baits I just showed you so you can go catch a bunch of slaunches this fall. Let's dive into it. All right, so the first bait of my top 5 fall baits. Let me preface this by saying every lake is different, especially in the fall, because you got lakes with shad in them where there's giant shad movements from the main lake all the way to the back of the creeks. And then you got lakes like these little man-made lakes around here where we got no shad at all. So you're pretty much just grinding it out, fishing the conditions, and hoping one of those big fish that are munching up to feed up before the winter are gonna eat one of your baits. But I'm gonna try to do a little bit of both, talk to you guys about that as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and completely cheat on bait number 1, and we're just going to include topwater baits, all different types of topwater baits as bait number 1 to throw in the fall. Because I can't pick one in specific that I like to throw the most during fall, and it's probably the most effective time of the year you can get away with throwing a topwater to get that big bite. So first off, we're going to talk about if you have a lot of grass in the fall. So if you have a lot of emergent grass that's topped out, a lot of it's dying everywhere. So the best thing you can possibly do, find wherever that grass is still a little bit green, or find where you have the cleanest water nearby. Now, if you have emergent grass on top of the water, I'm going to pick up frogs, just like I did all season long. Popping frog when there's a little bit more wind or when you're working the more sparse stuff, and a regular old hollow body frog whenever you're working that super thick, cheesy, matted grass. It's really a great time to throw a frog because those bass love to push the shad back into the creeks, and the shad will try to get up into the grass for a little bit of cover to try not to get eaten, obviously. And those bass love to flip them up on top, and then they'll bust right through that mat and eat your frog. Just an awesome time to throw a frog. Next scenario, that grass is a little bit below the surface or it's super sparse. Bust out Mr. Buzzbait. This is a crocodile buzzbait. I don't work with them all, but this has like become my favorite buzzbait. You bend it down a little bit. It's hard to tell without being in the water, but this thing will clack as it hits against the head. Super compact. It's nice and heavy, so you can get a nice low trajectory if you have any docks. Another area to throw this guy, Ozark Lakes. Whenever you have bluffy, rocky chunk rock on the way back into a creek, an awesome time to throw a buzzbait. So these next 2 baits, you're pretty much going to throw them in the exact same scenario as each other, and that would be Mr. Plopper and Mr. Walking Bait. Now, when do you throw each? Just let the fish tell you. There's so many days I've had this year and in the past where they just want the plopper, and the exact same thing goes for the walking bait. I don't know why or the reason for it, but some days they just want one a lot more than the other. Now, since you don't got to twitch it side to side, the plopper is something you can cover a ton more water with. When you're on a pattern and those fish are in really specific areas, but you got to cover a ton of water to get to them, pick up the plopper every time. The ideal scenario for these 2 baits, I like cleaner water with 3 to 5 foot visibility. You know, you can even go down to 1 to 2 foot visibility when they have something like grass or a big boulder or rock to look up and ambush out of. That's why they're so good on the Ozark Lakes and any of the highland reservoirs. When you got cleaner water and those chunky rocks for them to get under. Also super good at any lakes with deeper grass edges. That's the time to pick up these 2. All right, before we get any further and talk about the last 4 baits, I got 2 moving baits, 2 bottom baits. All 4 are extremely effective in the fall. I want to talk to you about something that has to do with the topwater baits, and that is the Cast King Speed Demon. I get questions probably 10 to 15 times a day. When will the Speed Demon be back in stock? Well, I can tell you folks, it's back in stock. That's the best reel you can throw those on, those topwater baits, because it's 9-3-1. It's what I've been using all year, and I will link it down below, so go click that link, pick some up. I know you guys have been waiting a long time, but the $70 9-3-1 reel is back available again. Go pick one up. All right, so let's get into these last 4 baits. Now, Early fall and mid fall around here are the time of the year I do a ton of junk fishing, and I've already moved kind of into that area where I'm covering water, fishing high percentage areas with really good cover I've found all season long, and hoping some big fish kind of get in there and they're just in there feeding at the right time. I kind of equate this to the same way I did when I pitched in college baseball and in high school baseball for that matter. When you started off this season pitching, you didn't necessarily have your best stuff when you were throwing, but the batters also weren't really ready to be facing the best pitching of the year. Now, by the time you got your arm loose, you got it really hot, you were in really good shape by the end of the summer, you know, you were throwing hard, you had a lot more control where your pitches were going, but the batters had seen every pitch, they'd seen every curveball, every off-speed pitch, and it was a lot harder to throw the ball by them. That's the exact same thing with the fish. While they were stupid right after ice off or early in the season, and maybe you were a little rusty from sitting around all winter and they were a little bit easier to catch, the same things happened. You're right there, great with your mechanics, your dock skipping and casting games right. Well, they've seen every bait in the books now. So I like to junk fish early fall into mid fall, later in the fall when they start to get in their winter patterns, when you can really do a lot of damage with those deeper bottom baits. So junk fishing bait, sorry for the little spiel there, but junk fishing bait number one I love. You guys see me throw it all the time and catch the hell out of the fish is the square bill crankbait. This is the Crush 50 from 6 Cents Lures. I like to match the hatch with my forage on this bait a whole lot. You know, if you got bluegill as the main forage in your lake, really like this live bluegill. I think it's custom live bluegill or something. If you got crawdads, I really like brown eye special. If you got shad in your lake, I really like that sexified chartreuse, or just your regular supermodel shad for a little bit cleaner water. Now, something to remember with the square bill, it is 100% worthless if you are not running it into things. Hit some dock poles, any riprap, laydowns, stumps, even grass lines or grass clumps, bounce this guy into it, you will get bit. One more thing to remember in the fall, a lot of times when those bass are really keyed in on shad, and there's just shad everywhere in your fishery, those bigger bass will key in big time on the biggest shad. You'll be in a lot of areas where you see shad in that young of the year age where they're only about an inch, inch and a half. There's big giant balls of them, and you can't get that many bites in those areas. But as soon as you find that one or two areas that has those big 4 to 5 inch shad, those big ones will be after those fish. That's when I pick up this guy right here. This is the Magnum square bill from 6 Cents Lures. It casts a freaking mile. You can cover a ton of water with it. Dives a little bit deeper. You can get it down 6, 8, 10 feet on smaller diameter line. Just a killer when those bass are really gorging on those, only on the big shad. Speaking of big shad, let's talk about bait number 3, and that is the big ol' nasty swim bait. This right here is the Dirty Shad from Fish 30 Acre Lures. I've been using these things for years. It's actually a replica of a shad body. The thing is so realistic and sexy in the water. So where do you throw these baits in the fall, these big swim baits? There's so much unknown about swim baits, and really, you gotta listen to the bass on these as well, because there's no set rules in swim bait fishing. But what I can tell you with throwing the very large swim baits, you have to have 2 or 3 feet plus visibility. If you don't have that in your lake, forget about it. Go throw a square bill, throw something else that makes a lot more noise. But when those fish are really holding on different pieces of isolated cover and structure, like a deeper isolated dock, an isolated point, maybe there's one tree or one stump on a point or an intersecting point back on the way to a creek, or if you have a lake that doesn't have any shad in it at all, it doesn't matter. A bigger swim bait around an isolated man-made dock or an isolated jetty or something like that, or even a grass line, it's an awesome time to pull this guy out. Clean water, fish at a bunch of different angles, make a bunch of different casts to anything that looks really good and it's really isolated, and these guys can get you your biggest bass of the year. All right, so we've talked about topwater baits, we've talked about the moving baits. Now we're going to talk about 2 baits that are much less sexy, but they probably catch twice as many fish for me as all the baits I've talked about combined. And that is the first one, Mr. Football Jig. You guys have seen me just freaking waylay fish on my homemade football jigs all season long. This fall is not going to be any different if it's anything like the last several falls. This guy is super, super effective when that water gets down into the mid-50s and lower, because they kind of get out of that fall funk phase around here where they're just kind of wandering around aimlessly. They don't know if they want to be shallow. The water is all algaed up like it is right now. Once the water cools down and cleans up, they really want to get back into their winter patterns. This guy is absolutely killer. Offshore, isolated rock, points, any hard spots on the bottom of the lake, this guy will absolutely get chewed. And I'll probably go more into detail as we get into the fall and I start whacking some fish on this. All right, last but not least, the least sexy bait we are going to talk about today. Bait number 5 is old Mr. Shaky Head Worm. Wah, wah. No, seriously, don't be sad about this guy because he will catch you a ton of fish. My favorite spot to throw this guy is actually in those lakes that are overloaded with shad. You're going to see so many shad moving back into them creeks. There's big old balls of them. And it's so much of the time, those bass are so clued in on those. They don't want nothing to do with your shad imitating baits. That's when you can pull out this guy and drag it underneath them. I like to look for any type of big pods of shad and pull this underneath them. Now at the same time, this also works really well in lakes where there's no shad at all. Like I said, this is the time of year when I do the most of my junk fishing, and when they just won't eat that moving bait or that flipping bait, but you know they're in there shallow around rocks, any type of wood, any type of nasty dock, stuff like that, the shaky head worm will absolutely get it done when those fish are feeding down, looking down, eating crayfish or even bluegill on those really tough condition days. All right, dudes, that's all I got. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to go hit that subscribe button if you like these top 5 tip videos, and leave a comment below. Let me know if you enjoy this type of video because I'm sure as hell going to be doing it moving forward. One more thing I want to add to this video. Joe, the Zark, you guys don't know him as Joe, my tournament partner, is already up at Mille Lacs. He went up there a couple days before I'm going to get there to go do some pre-fishing. He said on the way up, some guys flagged him down on the side of the interstate and were yelling, "Zark, go Zark!" Shout out to you guys. Thank you so much for supporting and giving Joe those props because the Zark deserves it and the Zark loved it. So shout out to you guys. Anyways, thank you for taking the time to watch today, guys. I have another video coming in a couple days. I'm out of here. Peace.
Look, I woke up in beast mode with my girl that's Beauty and the Beast though. Been top 5, these niggas sleep though. Only thing that's sold out is the seats though. Never sold my soul, never. Out there you stand before me and I respect my authority. If you my glory.